Unaware her husband is the secret trillionaire brother who owns his company, she pushed him and their child out of their home until she saw his name on the one paper she couldn't ignore. She didn't slap him, she didn't scream, she did something colder. In the narrow hallway of their Chicago apartment, Jessica Madoff placed one hand on her husband's shoulder and pushed him forward toward the door. Not violently, but deliberately, enough to tell him this wasn't a discussion, enough to tell him he no longer belonged. "Take the kid," she said, already glancing at her phone. "You can stay somewhere else for a while." Legally, the apartment was marital property. On the lease, though, only her name appeared, a detail she now clung to as proof that everything inside it was hers. Jacek stumbled one step, instinctively pulling their 7-year-old daughter close as her backpack slipped off her shoulder and hit the floor. The girl looked up, confused, clutching her father's coat. "This is our home," Marcus said, his voice barely steady. Jessica opened the door and pushed again, firmer this time, guiding them out like an inconvenience, not a family. "No," she said flatly. "This is my apartment. My name is on the lease." The door closed behind them. No yelling, no witnesses, just a father standing in the cold Chicago night with his child beside him. In a sleek car parked across the street, another man sat, watching, waiting. Jessica believed that push erased him. She believed the quiet man she married had nothing left once he stepped outside that door. She believed the company she worked for belonged to someone else entirely. What she never knew was this. On documents she never bothered to read, sealed inside trusts and legal structures older than her ambition, the man she pushed out was the majority beneficial owner of everything she thought belonged to her boss. Through layered entities and silent board votes, his family trust had quietly taken control of the company that bore another man's vision and his money. And while Jessica went back inside, confident and smiling, a different kind of movement had already begun. Internal audits, digital trails, and one court paper prepared in silence. Weeks later, Jessica would sit in a courtroom flipping casually through documents until her hands froze. Because the name she saw on that page was the same name she had just pushed out of her life. And that was the moment her world collapsed. Dear viewers, before we begin, your support means everything. If you're watching without subscribing, it's like letting Marcus's voice fade into silence. Subscribe now and tell us where you're watching from. Let's get into the story. The first thing that broke the silence was a soft click. Marcus Chen froze for half a second, his fingers hovering over a puzzle piece shaped like a small blue whale. His 7-year-old daughter, Emma Chen, sat cross-legged across from him in the living room floor, her brows pulled together in deep concentration. She was small for her age, with dark hair that never stayed combed and eyes that noticed far more than adults like to believe. The click came again, a phone notification. Marcus didn't look up right away, but he felt it, the shift in the room, the change in air. His wife, Jessica Madoff, 36, senior director at a fast-growing pharmaceutical company, walked past them toward the kitchen. She didn't glance down, didn't smile at her daughter, didn't slow her step. Her phone buzzed again. Jessica looked at the screen and smiled, not the tired smile she gave Marcus at night, not the polite one she used for neighbors. This smile was private, light, alive. Marcus noticed it. He said nothing. The apartment around them was quiet, modest, and carefully chosen. 2 bedrooms in a standard Chicago building, neutral walls, furniture from discount stores polished until it looked decent. No framed wards, no expensive art, nothing that suggested the man kneeling on the floor could, if he wished, buy the entire building and the 3 blocks behind it. What no one saw in this middle-class neighborhood was that the value he could pull with a single phone call sat beyond what most people could even name. His late father's network of companies once managed sums measured in the hundreds of billions. By the time everything was consolidated into a single structure, the assets under that umbrella were whispered about in private circles as trillion-level money. Not his personal cash, but a global financial machine he could quietly direct. "Dad," Emma whispered, fitting the whale into place. "It goes here, right?" Marcus smiled softly. "Yes, right there." His voice was calm. It always was. That calm had been learned a long time ago. Marcus was 24 when he first understood what silence could protect. He stood in a private office made of glass and quiet power. Men twice his age rose from their seats as he entered, not out of courtesy, but obligation. Lawyers, board members, family trustees, all of them waiting. His father had died 3 weeks earlier. Not poor, not quietly. He'd been one of those men whose name most people never heard, but whose decisions quietly shifted markets. The architect behind a web of funds and holding companies that controlled pieces of banks, energy firms, tech giants, never loudly branded, always hidden one layer back. His voice still lived in Marcus's memory, steady and firm. "If people love your money, they will never love you." He had said it the night before Marcus left for college, placing a thin folder on the table between them. "If you ever marry, test the heart, not the hunger." That folder became his life. Inside was the blueprint for a world most people never saw. Chen Holdings' master trust. He inherited a fortune measured in numbers most people never say out loud. The wealth wasn't stored in cash or homes. It lived in layered trusts, holding companies, and board-controlled entities designed to protect him from attention and predators. His name was hidden behind legal walls, so thick they required court orders and multiple jurisdictions to penetrate. On public paperwork, all anyone ever saw were institutional names and faceless entities. No Marcus, no hint that a single person stood at the center. He didn't just inherit money, he inherited control without visibility. A board liaison handled formal votes, professional trustees signed documents. They all knew who the principal beneficiary was, but no one outside that circle did. And he chose to keep it that way. Jessica Madoff entered his life 2 years later, long before the corner office, the promotions, and the applause. She was working her way up from entry level, sleeping 4 hours a night, drinking cheap energy drinks, and talking endlessly about building something meaningful. Not fast, not flashy, meaningful. That word mattered to Marcus. She talked more about the patients her company could help than the potential profits, more about the people she wanted to mentor than the lifestyle she wanted to buy. When she asked what he did, and he said consulting, strategy for family businesses, she just nodded and moved on. She didn't ask which families. She didn't ask what size. She didn't try to impress him with numbers. When Medicor Pharmaceuticals needed capital to survive a critical expansion phase, Marcus made a single call from a quiet corner. His legal team created a venture shell, a standard investment vehicle used by the family office. On paper, it had a forgettable name and a registered address in a city Jessica had never visited. The money moved quietly, cleanly. Chen Holdings sat 2 layers above it, invisible. She saw only a committed institutional investor. She never asked who ultimately owned it. Marcus took that as a sign. She wasn't chasing him for money. Once, months later, when Medicor landed its first major FDA approval, Jessica laughed and said, "Whoever that fund is, they must own half the world." Marcus smiled. He didn't realize that her family structures held a controlling stake in her company, and that as they raised more capital, his trust kept quietly matching and consolidating until his side was the single largest shareholder. She didn't correct him. The puzzle was nearly finished now. Jessica opened the fridge, poured herself a drink, and leaned against the counter. Her phone buzzed again. She typed quickly, her back still turned.
Marcus watched her, not with suspicion, but with attention. Love, he believed, meant noticing before accusing. He placed the final piece into the puzzle. Emma clapped quietly. "We did it!" "Yes, we did," he said. "We did." That night, after Emma was asleep and Jessica was still on her phone, Marcus walked into the bedroom alone. He knelt beside the closet and slid open a drawer that stayed locked. Inside was a slim folder. No logos, no colors, just black text. Chen Holdings, Master Trust. After the wedding, the trust's lawyers quietly updated some of the internal paperwork to reflect his married name. The outside world still saw only corporate entities. Jessica had never seen the master document. She'd never needed to. At least, not yet. Marcus rested his hand on it. He didn't open it. "I promised myself," he whispered into the quiet room. Behind him, down the hall, a phone buzzed again, and this time Jessica laughed softly. Marcus closed the drawer. The silence stayed, but it felt different now, like it was waiting for something to break.
The sound of applause filled the conference room, and Jessica Madoff stood in the center of it. She straightened her blazer as colleagues clapped, executives smiled, and cameras flashed. Medicorp's logo gleamed on the far wall, sleek, modern, expensive. At 36, Jessica looked every bit the successful corporate director now. The company had outgrown its early struggles. The office was larger, the staff was bigger, the praise was louder. And Jessica drank it in. From the edge of the room stood Derek Stanford, 32, her newly promoted executive assistant. He wasn't clapping the loudest, but he was watching the closest. Tall, sharp-eyed, and always dressed one step more polished than required, Derek had a talent for knowing where power sat before it spoke. When Jessica stepped down from the small stage, he was already there. "That was impressive," he said lightly, handing her a tablet before she even asked. "The board loved you." Jessica smiled. Of course they did. Derek laughed, not too loud, just enough. As they walked, he leaned in slightly, his fingers brushing her arm as if by accident. Jessica didn't pull away. She barely noticed the touch, but her body remembered it. Across the glass wall of the conference room, no one questioned the closeness. Senior directors were allowed personal gravity. The more successful she became, the more forgiveness people offered her behavior. At the office, everyone knew Medicorp had a major institutional backer. They didn't know that the quiet board representative, who rarely appeared in person, answered directly to Marcus's family trust. Jessica treated that investor as a faceless force, useful but distant. At home, the change showed differently. Marcus noticed it first, in the quiet spaces. Jessica stopped asking how his day went, stopped sitting on the floor with Emma, stopped sharing her calendar the way she used to when everything was chaotic and small. They had once used a shared family email and calendar to juggle early meetings and childcare. Now most invites went only to her work account, an account Derek managed. When Marcus asked about a late meeting, Jessica waved it off. Just work stuff. When he mentioned a dinner he thought they'd planned, she frowned. I never confirmed that. The shared calendar stopped updating. Invitations no longer came. Messages disappeared before he could read them. Not erased, redirected. At the office, Derek had taken over Jessica's private schedule. He filtered calls. He answered emails before Jessica ever saw them. He decided what reached her and what didn't. He told himself it was efficiency. He told himself it was his job. But when Jessica joked, "I don't know what I'd do without you," Derek smiled longer than necessary. One evening, Marcus sat on the couch folding laundry while Emma colored beside him. The TV played softly, but no one was watching. Jessica sat across the room, her phone glowing in her hand. It buzzed. Jessica smiled. Emma looked up from her crayons. "Dad?" "Yes, sweetheart." Emma hesitated, then lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. Why does Mom smile at her phone like that? Marcus's hands stopped mid-fold. The question was innocent. The timing was not. He looked at Jessica. She hadn't heard or pretended not to.
Marcus forced a gentle smile. "Sometimes people get happy messages." Emma nodded slowly. "She doesn't smile like that at us." The words landed softly but deep. Marcus pulled Emma close. "Finish your drawing." He didn't look at Jessica again. That night, the apartment felt too quiet. Marcus waited up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold. Midnight passed, then later. When Jessica finally came home, her jacket smelled unfamiliar, not of perfume, but of too many hours somewhere else. "You're up," she said, distracted, scrolling through her phone. "I was waiting," Marcus replied calmly. "For what?" "For you." Jessica sighed, not angrily, but impatiently, like the question cost her something. Marcus studied her face. The woman he married was still there, but slightly out of focus, like a photo that had been handled too many times. He chose his words carefully. "Are you happy?" Jessica didn't look up. "You worry too much. Everything's fine." She walked past him toward the bedroom, already typing. Marcus stayed where he was. Silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was crowded with things unsaid. Across town, Derek Stanford sat alone in his apartment, laptop open, phone in hand. He reread the message he was about to send. Not romantic, not obvious, just dangerous enough. His thumb hovered, then he typed. "He still doesn't know, right?" He watched the message send. 3 dots appeared. Then Jessica's reply came quickly. "Of course not." Derek leaned back, satisfaction flickering across his face. He didn't hate Marcus, he barely thought about him. To Derek, this wasn't betrayal, it was opportunity. Back at home, Jessica's phone buzzed again. She smiled. Marcus saw it this time. He didn't ask who it was from, he didn't accuse, he didn't raise his voice. He simply watched as the space between them widened by inches that felt like miles. Later, when Jessica finally slept, Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling. He thought of his father's words, "Test the heart, not the hunger." He had tested, and something had cracked. In the dark, his eyes shifted toward the closet, toward the drawer he hadn't opened. Not yet, but soon. Because outside the bedroom door, the quiet wasn't just waiting anymore. It was preparing.
The argument began before Jessica even stepped fully inside the apartment. The front door slammed harder than usual, rattling the framed family photo on the wall. Marcus felt the vibration from the living room floor where he sat, helping Emma with homework. Emma flinched. Jessica Madoff stood near the door, her coat still on, jaw tight, eyes sharp with something that looked like anger, but felt more like decision. "We need to talk," she said. "Not can we, not please." Marcus rose slowly. "You're home late." Jessica scoffed. "Because someone around here actually works." The words hit harder than shouting would have. Emma looked up, confused. Marcus placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Go to your room, sweetheart, just for a minute." "Did I do something wrong?" "No," he said quickly, "you didn't." Jessica didn't correct her. When Emma disappeared down the hall, Jessica stepped forward, arms crossed, pacing like someone preparing a speech she'd rehearsed in her head on the drive home. "I can't keep doing this. I'm carrying everything, the job, the bills, the pressure." Marcus listened, his face calm, though something inside him tightened. "I support you. I always have." Jessica laughed, short and bitter. "Support? You sit at home, you don't contribute, you don't understand what it takes to build something." Marcus felt the sting, but he didn't interrupt. "You don't even try to keep up anymore," Jessica continued. "You live in this quiet little world. Meanwhile, I'm surrounded by people who actually add value." She didn't say Derek's name. She didn't have to. Marcus's voice was steady. "If this is about work stress, it's about you," she snapped. The room went silent. Jessica took a breath, as if calming herself, then spoke again, colder now. "I need space." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then take it. We can talk about—" "No,"
she interrupted. "You and the kid can stay somewhere else for a while." The words landed like something heavy dropped on glass. Marcus stared at her. "Jessica, this is our home." Jessica didn't hesitate. "No," she said flatly, "this is my apartment. My name is on the lease. I pay the rent." She didn't mention that legally, marriage didn't work the way she wanted to believe. In her mind, the person paying the bills owned the walls. That was the moment something in Marcus broke. Not loudly, not visibly, but completely. He remembered signing the papers years ago, letting the lease be in her name alone because he didn't want any trail that might tie their personal life back to Chen Holdings. Believing marriage meant shared ground, not weapons. He had trusted her. He had never imagined she would use paperwork as a knife. "Where are we supposed to go?" he asked quietly. Jessica looked away. "That's not my problem right now." "Not our problem. Your problem." Marcus nodded once. "Okay," he said. That surprised her. The packing was silent. No yelling, no thrown objects, no dramatic last words. Marcus moved with calm precision, placing clothes into a single suitcase. Emma watched from the doorway, clutching her favorite backpack, too big for her small shoulders. "Are we going on a trip?" Emma asked softly. "Yes," Marcus said, kneeling in front of her. "A short one." "Will Mom come?" He didn't answer right away. "Not right now." Emma nodded, trying to be brave. Jessica stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching like a stranger observing a process she'd ordered but didn't want to witness. When Marcus zipped the suitcase, Jessica checked her phone. A message lit up the screen. She smiled. Marcus saw it. He said nothing. At the door, he paused. "Jessica," he said, not pleading, not angry. "If you're doing this because you think I'm weak..." She cut him off. "I'm doing this because I'm done." He studied her face. The woman he married had been replaced by someone who believed power came from being admired by the right people, even if it meant stepping on the wrong ones. "Then I hope it was worth it," he said. Jessica opened the door. Cold Chicago air rushed in. Outside, the night was quiet. No neighbors watching, no drama to witness. Marcus stepped on the landing with Emma beside him. Jessica stayed inside. The door closed behind them. The sound echoed longer than it should have. As Marcus walked down the steps, he noticed a car parked across the street. Sleek, new. The engine was off, but the interior light glowed faintly. Someone was inside. Marcus didn't stop walking, but he knew. Derek Stanford sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on the building, watching. Not surprised, not guilty, expectant. Emma tugged Marcus's hand. "Dad, who's that?" Marcus looked straight ahead. "No one we need to worry about." But he memorized the car, the shape, the color, the certainty in his chest. As they reached the end of the block, Marcus glanced back once. The apartment lights were already dimming. He understood then this wasn't just abandonment, it was replacement. Marcus adjusted the suitcase in his hand and kept walking. Behind him, across the street, the car door opened. And somewhere far deeper than anger, something quiet inside Marcus began to wake. Something patient, something prepared. And it knew exactly where to begin. The first thing Marcus felt in the new place was the door locking behind him. The sound was sharp, final. It echoed through the narrow hallway of the furnished rental and settled deep in his chest. He stood still for a moment, Emma's small hand wrapped tightly in his suitcase resting against his leg like it was catching its breath too. This place was quiet, too quiet. No laughter from the next room, no footsteps overhead, no voice reminding him of what he had just lost. But it was safe. The apartment was small, clean and temporary, arranged with a single call to the family office. A corporate lease had been signed electronically in his married name before he even reached the neighborhood. The keys waited in a lockbox. No front desk, no questions. Marcus exhaled for the first time since the door had closed behind them at the apartment. Emma looked around, taking it all in with the seriousness only children carry in moments like this. "Is this our new home?" she asked. "For now," Marcus said gently. He set the suitcase down and knelt in front of her. Emma's backpack slipped off one shoulder, nearly pulling her sideways. She frowned. "Did we do something wrong?" The question pierced him deeper than Jessica's words ever could. Marcus placed both hands on Emma's arms and met her eyes. "No, we didn't do anything wrong." She waited. "We just learned something important, and sometimes learning means moving." Emma nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but trusting him anyway. That trust steadied him. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep on the unfamiliar bed, Marcus sat alone at the small kitchen table. The apartment hummed softly, every sound amplified by newness. The stillness pressed in, but it no longer felt empty. It felt focused. Marcus reached for his phone. His hands were steady. He made the first call. The man on the other end answered on the first ring. He'd known Marcus since he was a teenager, back when his last name opened doors quietly instead of loudly. "I need legal counsel," Marcus said immediately. There was no surprise in his voice. "Understood." The first thing Marcus felt in the new place was the door locking behind him. The sound was sharp, final. It echoed through the narrow hallway of the furnished rental and settled deep in his chest. He stood still for a moment, Emma's small hand wrapped tightly in his suitcase resting against his leg like it was catching its breath too. This place was quiet, too quiet. No laughter from the next room, no footsteps overhead, no voice reminding him of what he had just lost. But it was safe. The apartment was small, clean, and temporary, arranged with a single call to the family office. A corporate lease had been signed electronically in his married name before he even reached the neighborhood. The keys waited in a lockbox. No front desk, no questions. Marcus exhaled for the first time since the door had closed behind them at the apartment. Emma looked around, taking it all in with the seriousness only children carry in moments like this. "Is this our new home?" she asked. "For now," Marcus said gently. He set the suitcase down and knelt in front of her. Emma's backpack slipped off one shoulder, nearly pulling her sideways. She frowned. "Did we do something wrong?" The question pierced him deeper than Jessica's words ever could. Marcus placed both hands on Emma's arms and met her eyes. "No, we didn't do anything wrong." She waited. "We just learned something important, and sometimes learning means moving." Emma nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but trusting him anyway. That trust steadied him. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep on the unfamiliar bed, Marcus sat alone at the small kitchen table. The apartment hummed softly, every sound amplified by newness. The stillness pressed in, but it no longer felt empty. It felt focused. Marcus reached for his phone. His hands were steady. He made the first call. The man on the other end answered on the first ring. He'd known Marcus since he was a teenager, back when his last name opened.
The first file hit the table like a gunshot. Marcus didn't flinch, but everyone else in the room did. The private financial investigator stood across from him, sleeves rolled up, eyes tired but sharp. The small conference room was plain, chosen on purpose. No windows, no distractions, just truth laid out piece by piece. "This is everything the internal audit pulled so far," he said, approved by the board's representative, "and it's not good." He opened the folder. Emails appeared first, deleted ones, recovered ones, messages Jessica believed were gone forever, still sitting on company backup servers that now, by board order, belonged to this investigation. Marcus scanned them silently. His face didn't change, but something deep inside him hardened. There were conversations between Jessica and Derek that had nothing to do with work schedules, complaints about Marcus, jokes at his expense, decisions made behind his back. The investigator slid another document forward. Expense reports, he said, approved by Jessica, some falsified, some disguised. Marcus's eyes moved line by line. Hotel charges listed as client meetings, luxury purchases labeled office equipment, travel reimbursements that matched no business calendar. And then, this one matters. A promotion notice. Derek Stanford promoted to a strategic operations role. No formal job description, no board approval, no standard compensation review, just Jessica's digital signature and a salary adjustment that outpaced similar roles by a wide margin. Marcus looked up. That position doesn't exist in the original structure. It didn't until Jessica created it with a backdated memo. There's also a bonus pool she diverted discretionary funds into. Most of it went to him. News tightened. Across town, Derek Stanford stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his jacket. He smiled at his reflection. Everything still looked like it was going according to plan. Jessica had moved Marcus out. The apartment was quiet now. Her attention belonged to Derek more openly, more recklessly. He could feel the shift, the confidence. "You don't have to hide anymore," she told him later that night, running her fingers lightly along his arm. "Once the divorce is final, we can be public." Derek nodded, distracted, already imagining his future. But Derek wasn't reckless. Behind his smile, he was careful. When Jessica left the room, he opened his laptop. He saved emails, downloaded attachments, copied expense approvals with her name on them. Messages where she instructed him to reroute funds or put it under client development. No one checks those lines. He didn't do it out of guilt. He did it because he understood power. And he knew when a woman burned bridges too fast, someone always fell with her. He had no intention of being the one underneath. Back in the quiet conference room, the investigator reached the final section. "Company funds," he said, "used for personal property, nothing subtle." He paused. "All tied to Jessica's sign-offs. The audit log shows she overrode finance flags more than once." Marcus leaned back slowly. "So if this goes public," he said, "she doesn't just lose her reputation." "No," the investigator replied. "She loses credibility with the board and the court. There's enough here for a formal complaint." Marcus nodded once. "Good." That afternoon, he made another call. His attorney arrived an hour later. He was older, composed, and spoke only when necessary. He laid out documents with careful precision. "Divorce petition," he said, citing abandonment and financial misconduct. "The timing of her pushing you out with your child, combined with these records, strengthens your position." Marcus read it without hesitation. "Custody request, primary, based on stability, her admitted abandonment in messages, and the pattern of misuse of corporate funds." He signed. Then he reached for a separate folder, thinner. He hesitated before opening it. "This," he said carefully, "changes the nature of everything." Inside were documents Marcus had not touched in years: ownership structures, trust disclosures, board authority summaries, all connected to one entity, Chen Holdings Master Trust. The attorney studied his face. "If this goes to court," he said quietly, "your wife won't just lose her marriage." Marcus finished the sentence without raising his voice. "She'll lose her career." The attorney nodded. "Completely."
The board liaison has confirmed your trust holds a majority stake with authority to initiate leadership changes if necessary. Once we attach this to the divorce proceedings, it becomes part of the record. Silence filled the room. Not fear, not regret, resolution. Later that evening, Marcus sat alone at the small dining table. Emma was asleep in the other room, clutching a stuffed animal she'd carried since she was 3. He stared at the stack of papers in front of him. So many years of restraint, so much silence. He hadn't hidden his identity out of shame. He had hidden it out of belief. Belief that love didn't need leverage, that marriage didn't require proof. He exhaled slowly. That belief was gone. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Just one line. "I don't know what she told you, but I'm not the villain here." It didn't say who it was. It didn't have to. The timing, the wording, the avoidance of his name. Derek. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't need to. Everyone reveals themselves, eventually. The next morning, he sat across from his attorney again. He slid one final document across the table. It was heavier than the rest, not in weight, but in consequence. At the top, stamped and sealed, Major Shareholder Disclosure, Court Sealed. Marcus's name was printed clearly, fully spelled, legally undeniable. Not as husband, not as dependent, as the beneficial owner behind Chen Holdings' master trust. The attorney studied his face. "If this goes to court," he said quietly, "Jessica will see exactly who has held the power this entire time." Marcus placed his hand on the paper. His voice was calm. "There was no going back the moment she pushed my child out of her home." He stood. The document remained on the table, waiting. And somewhere across town, Jessica Madoff was still smiling at her phone, unaware that the ground beneath her had already begun to disappear.
The envelope hit Jessica Madoff's desk in front of everyone. Not slid, not handed gently, placed firm and unmistakable. The conference room went quiet. Senior managers sat frozen mid-discussion, laptops open, pens hovering. Jessica looked up, irritated, ready to dismiss whoever had interrupted her. A court officer stood there instead. "Jessica Madoff," the man said evenly, "you've been served." The room seemed to shrink. Jessica scoffed and leaned back in her chair. "You're doing this here?" The officer didn't answer. He simply turned and walked out. Jessica picked up the envelope slowly, eyes scanning the bold heading, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." A few people exchanged glances. Someone cleared their throat. Jessica laughed, loud, dismissive. "Well," she said, waving the papers, "guess that's settled." She didn't read further. She tossed the envelope onto the table like it was nothing more than a bad joke and forced the meeting forward. Slides resumed. Numbers flickered on the screen. Her voice sounded almost normal, but the room never fully recovered. Later, alone in her office with the door closed, Jessica finally opened the envelope properly. She skimmed the first few pages. The language was sharp, precise, legal. Petition for dissolution, primary custody requested, financial disclosure demanded, temporary restraining order on asset transfers. Jessica's mouth twisted. "He doesn't have the money to fight this," she muttered to herself. "He's bluffing with some cheap lawyer." She flipped near the back and stopped. There was an attachment. Not long, not traumatic, just a clause her eyes snagged on. Financial interest subject to review under Chen Holdings Master Trust. Jessica frowned. "What the hell is that?" she said out loud. She knew the name. Chen Holdings Master Trust was the institutional investor that had backed Medicorp's early rounds, the one she always called our silent whale. She'd seen it in cap tables and board minutes, but never thought about who sat behind it. "Probably some technicality," she muttered. "Something for my corporate lawyer to explain away."
She didn't sign anything. She didn't respond. She put the packet aside and went back to checking projections. Across town, Marcus sat in his attorney's office, hands folded in his lap. He hadn't been present when the papers were served. He didn't need to be. "This will provoke her," the attorney said calmly. "She'll focus on the divorce language and underestimate the financial references." "That's fine," Marcus replied. "She always has." He thought of Emma, adjusting to a new routine without complaint. Stability mattered now. Control mattered more. On the desk between them lay 2 stacks of documents. The divorce petition, already filed, the sealed majority shareholder disclosure, prepared but not yet presented in court. "When the court schedules the financial hearing," the attorney continued, tapping the sealed packet, "we'll ask the judge to open this under confidentiality first. She'll see it then." Marcus nodded once. "Good," he said. "Let the law go in order." That evening, Jessica stormed into her lawyer's office without an appointment. "Tell me this is nothing," she said, slamming the papers down. Sarah Lehman, a seasoned corporate attorney who had represented Jessica since her early promotions, adjusted her glasses and read carefully. She scanned the divorce allegations, then lingered on the financials. She didn't speak for a long moment. Jessica frowned. "You're being dramatic." Sarah finally looked up. "This is not nothing." "It's a domestic case," Jessica snapped. "We'll settle. Just make it cheap." Sarah tapped the page with the Chen Holdings clause. "This part is not domestic," she said. "It references Chen Holdings Master Trust. That name doesn't show up in standard divorce forms by accident." "Webby, yeah, I know them," Jessica waved it off. "They're just one of our investors." "They're your largest investor," Sarah corrected quietly. "And if this trust language is coming into a family court file, it means someone is tying your marriage to your ownership structure." Jessica laughed, but it sounded thinner now. "He's a stay-at-home parent, Sarah. He doesn't own anything." Sarah didn't smile. "The clause doesn't name him. It names the trust. I need to confirm who holds beneficial control and what rights they have." "Fine," Jessica shrugged. "Do your job." As she reached the door, Sarah added quietly, "Until I confirm, don't move any assets. No large transfers, no sudden sales. If this escalates, everything becomes visible to the court, to regulators, and to your board." Jessica paused. "You're overreacting." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but freezing is cheaper than being accused of hiding money." Jessica scoffed. "You worry too much." She left, already rehearsing her version of the story in her head. That night, Jessica poured herself a drink in the quiet apartment. The silence felt different now, not empty, exposed. Her phone buzzed. Derek's name lit up the screen. "Are you okay?" She typed back. "Of course, it's just paperwork." He replied quickly, "Be careful. Paperwork is how people lose things." For the first time, a small thread of unease tugged at her. Across town, Marcus tucked Emma into bed. She looked up at him. "Are we going back home soon?" Marcus brushed her hair gently. "We're building a better one." He turned off the light and stood alone in the doorway for a moment. His phone buzzed, a message from his attorney. "Ownership verification from the trust will be ready for the hearing." Marcus closed his eyes. "Good," he said. "Let the law go in order." Outside, the world went on as usual. Inside court systems and boardrooms, quiet mechanisms were already turning, and Jessica Madoff, still convinced she was untouchable, had no idea that the next paper placed in front of her would be the one she could no longer ignore.
Derek Stanford knew something was wrong the moment he opened the copy of the court filing Jessica had left on her desk. She'd stormed out of her office to shout at someone in operations, leaving the papers half open. Derek's job had always included keeping her life organized. He told himself he was just checking what chaos he'd need to manage. His hands trembled, not from shock, but from recognition. He sat in his apartment later that night,
laptop glowing in the dark, rereading the legal language he'd quietly scanned and then downloaded from the court's online system. This wasn't a dramatic threat. This wasn't emotional posturing. This was careful, surgical, written by someone who knew exactly where to strike. Words like full financial disclosure, temporary restraint on asset transfers, and trust-linked interests involving Chen Holdings Master Trust stared back at him. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a fuse. Derek leaned back slowly, confidence draining with every line. He thought of Marcus Chen, not angry, not loud, not desperate, just calm. Always calm. That calm suddenly felt dangerous. Derek had entered Jessica's life believing he understood power. He was 32, ambitious, and smart enough to know when a woman was rising and when to attach himself to that rise. Jessica had been easy, too easy, flattered by attention, hungry for admiration, grateful for someone who made her life simpler. When Marcus disappeared from the apartment, Derek thought he had won. Now, staring at the filings, Derek realized he had misjudged the man he replaced. Marcus wasn't weak, he was quiet, and quiet people didn't fight without preparation. The next morning, Derek arrived at the office early, too early. He watched executives walk past his desk with tight expressions. Whispers traveled faster than emails now. People sensed instability before it was announced. Jessica wasn't in yet. Derek logged into his computer and began copying files, not randomly, carefully. Emails between him and Jessica, voice notes she'd sent late at night, expense approvals with her signature but his account listed, messages where she told him to just reclassify it or put that through under client development, no one checks that line. He saved everything to an encrypted flash drive. Then he opened a secure browser and searched for a name he had heard in the halls recently, the external investigator hired for the board review. He had overheard Jessica complain about some guy digging around because the investors are nervous. That was enough. The meeting took place in a neutral location. No logos, no windows, no names beyond first ones. The investigator studied Derek across the table. He saw fear, but also calculation. "You're not here to apologize," he said. Derek swallowed. "No." "Then why are you here?" He slid the flash drive across the table. "I know how this ends," he said quietly. "I just don't want to be crushed with her." The investigator didn't touch the drive yet. "What's on it?" "Emails, approvals, messages, proof that she directed transactions and used company money for personal things. Most of it has her name on it, not mine." "And what do you want in return?" he asked. Derek met his eyes. "I want it on record that I cooperated," he said quietly. "If this goes to regulators, if there are charges, I want them to see that I didn't hide anything. I won't lie to protect her." The investigator leaned back. "That's not immunity," he said. "I know, but it's better than pretending I didn't know anything until it's too late." He studied him for a moment, then picked up the drive. Later, that evening, Marcus received the call. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. "Derek Stanford wants to cooperate," the investigator said. "He provided extensive evidence. He confirms your wife directed the transfers and created his inflated role." Marcus paused. "Why?" he asked. "Self-preservation, not remorse." Marcus nodded slowly. "Tell him this," Marcus said. "Tell the truth fully. The law will decide the rest. No threats, no bargaining, just reality." The investigator hesitated. "You understand, he helped hurt you." Marcus's voice remained steady. "And now he's helping the truth hurt her. That's enough for me." The next morning, Derek submitted his resignation. No farewell email, no explanation, no transition period. By noon, his corporate access was revoked, his badge stopped working, his name vanished from internal directories. He packed his desk quickly, aware of eyes watching from behind glass walls, some curious, some relieved, some calculating their own distance from Jessica. He didn't look back. Jessica found out last. She arrived at the office furious, already irritated by unanswered calls. She stormed through the lobby, expecting Derek to appear with explanations and a coffee in hand. He didn't. His desk was empty, clean, as if he had never been there. Jessica grabbed the nearest assistant. "Where's Derek?" The assistant hesitated. "He resigned, effective immediately." Jessica's face hardened. "That's impossible." "He turned in his badge this morning. IT removed his access. HR said he left his resignation letter on their desk." Jessica stood still. For the first time since the divorce filing, something cold slid down her spine. She pulled out her phone and called Derek. Straight to voicemail. She called again. Nothing. Across the city, Marcus sat quietly at the dining table, Emma coloring beside him. His phone buzzed. A message from the investigator. "She gave us everything." Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment, not in relief, in acceptance. He looked at his daughter, smiling softly at her drawing, unaware of how close the storm now was. Marcus reached for his tea, hands steady. Somewhere, Jessica Madoff was beginning to realize that the people she relied on most were gone. And very soon, the truth she had ignored would be placed in front of her, not as accusation, but as fact.
The room went quiet before anyone was told to be quiet. Not the nervous kind, not the respectful kind, the heavy kind. Jessica Madoff sat at one table with her attorney, Sarah. Her shoulders were squared, hands folded, confidence carefully reconstructed after weeks of strain. Her suit was tailored, her expression controlled. Across the aisle, Marcus Chen sat beside his attorney. He did not look at Jessica. He did not need to. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. Paper rustled. Silence returned. This was the first formal financial hearing in their divorce case. On the docket, it looked routine. To everyone actually in the room, it was anything but. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked down at the file. "This court will now address financial disclosures relevant to the dissolution petition and related corporate interests," she said calmly. Jessica leaned back slightly. Routine, she told herself. She had faced worse in executive reviews. The judge nodded to the clerk. "Clerk, please distribute the sealed ownership disclosures for review." The clerk stood and began placing documents on both tables. Jessica accepted her copy without looking up. She recognized the line at the top, "Sealed for court review only." Another form, another distraction. She flipped the first page, then the second. Still casual, still relaxed, until her fingers froze. Her eyes locked onto a line she had never seen before, then another, then a name. Marcus Chen. Printed clearly. Not as spouse, not as beneficiary, not as witness, but as majority beneficial owner, controlling interest via Chen Holdings Master Trust, authorized voting authority over Medicor Pharmaceuticals Incorporated. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. The room didn't move. It didn't need to. She flipped the page again, faster now, scanning as if the words might change if she read them differently. They didn't. The corporate records attached from Chen Holdings' board liaison confirmed it. The trust that had funded her company, her silent whale, was not just a big investor. It was his. Her hands began to shake. Across the aisle, Marcus finally lifted his eyes. This was the first time he had looked at her since the night she pushed him and their child out of the apartment. His face held no anger, no satisfaction, just certainty. Jessica looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Not the quiet man who cooked dinner, not the patient husband who listened, not the father she had dismissed, but the person she never bothered to ask about, the person who owned everything she thought was hers. Sarah leaned in close, her voice barely audible. "Jessica, we need to request a recess." Jessica didn't respond. The judge watched her carefully. "Miss Madoff," she said evenly, "do you require clarification on the document?" Jessica swallowed. I don't understand," she managed. The judge nodded once. "That," she said, "is not the same as the document being unclear." She turned to the clerk. "Please confirm the basis for this disclosure." "Yes, Your Honor. The ownership records are certified by the trustees of Chen Holdings Master Trust and corroborated by Medicorp's board minutes. The trust holds a controlling stake, and the beneficial owner is named as Mr. Marcus Chen." Jessica's heart pounded. Trust control. Her company, all tied to the man she pushed out of her home. Marcus's attorney rose. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "the petitioner chose not to disclose his financial position during the marriage, which he is legally permitted to do under these trust structures. However, given the allegations of financial misconduct and misuse of corporate funds by Miss Madoff, his ownership is now directly relevant." Jessica's attorney stood quickly. "This is highly irregular. My client was never informed." The judge raised a hand. "Not being informed," she said, "is not the same as the structure being illegal." She turned back to Jessica. "Miss Madoff," she asked anically, "did you know that the majority investor in your company was a trust controlled by your spouse?" The question hung in the air. Every eye turned towards her. Jessica opened her mouth. No words came out. She closed it again. Nothing. For the first time in her life, confidence failed her completely. Silence answered for her. Marcus exhaled slowly. Not in relief, in release. Years of restraint, years of choosing love over leverage. All of it led here, not to revenge, but to truth. The judge made a note. "Let the record reflect," she said, "that Miss Madoff was not aware of her spouse's controlling ownership interest." She paused. "And let the record further reflect that this does not alter the validity of that ownership." Jessica's phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't check it. She couldn't. Because the ground beneath her, the company, the identity, the power, had already cracked. And as the judge turned to the next issue on the docket, financial restraints and referrals, the woman who thought she owned everything finally understood. She had never even read the fine print.
The gavel didn't need to be loud to destroy her. It came down once, sharp, final. Jessica Madoff felt the sound more than she heard it. It traveled through the table, through the chair, straight into her chest. For a brief moment, the room spun, not because the judge was speaking too fast, but because her world was falling apart faster than her mind could keep up. The judge's voice was calm, almost gentle, as she delivered the sequence that would undo her. Based on the evidence presented, this court grants the petition for dissolution of marriage. Jessica's hands clenched. Primary physical custody of the minor child is awarded to the petitioner, Mr. Marcus Chen. Ms. Madoff is granted scheduled visitation as outlined in the parenting plan. Her throat tightened. The court further issues a protective order over all marital assets in Ms. Madoff's personal holdings in Medicorp Pharmaceuticals. No sale, transfer, or encumbrance may occur without court approval. Sarah Lehman, her attorney, lowered her eyes. Finally, the judge continued. Based on the documented misuse of corporate funds and the corroborating testimony provided through the board-authorized audit, this court is referring the financial evidence to the appropriate regulatory and prosecutorial authorities for review. Silence followed. Not shock, not outrage, just the quiet recognition that nothing in that room could undo what had been said. Across the aisle, Marcus closed his eyes briefly, not in victory, in completion. He felt Emma's future settle into place, stable, protected, shielded from the damage her mother had created. When he opened his eyes, the judge was already moving on, paperwork being signed, records updated. The process continued without ceremony because justice didn't need drama to be devastating. The board meeting happened that same afternoon. No speeches, no inspirational slides, just an agenda item. The Chen Holdings representative joined via secure video. With the majority stake now openly tied to Marcus, no one in the room misunderstood whose wishes were being expressed when the representative spoke. A motion was read to suspend Jessica Madoff as Senior Director of Medicorp Pharmaceuticals, effective immediately, pending the outcome of the financial investigation, and to remove her from all operational authority. No debate, no defenses. Hands raised. Unanimous. By the time Jessica returned to the building, her access card still opened the lobby turnstiles but failed at the executive floor. Security met her there. "Ms. Madoff," one of them said, not unkindly, "we've been instructed to escort you to HR." She was given a formal letter outlining her suspension and the board's decision. Her laptop was taken, her corporate email access cut, her office door badge deactivated. Colleagues avoided her eyes, some out of fear, some out of relief, some out of shame for not being surprised. By evening, the story had leaked. Headlines spread quickly through industry news and social media. Senior director suspended amid financial probe. Majority owner revealed as estranged spouse. Board moves to stabilize Medicorp after internal audit. The woman who claimed to have built everything now had nothing solid to stand on. Jessica wandered through the Chicago streets like a ghost. Every place she once felt respected now felt hostile. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Messages from reporters, calls from people pretending to care, silence from those who once promised loyalty. Derek never called. Sarah sent a single text. "Given today's developments in the criminal referral, I can no longer represent you. I recommend independent counsel experienced in white-collar defense." Jessica stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Outside the courthouse earlier that day, Marcus had stepped into the late afternoon light. The air had felt different, lighter, like something heavy had finally been lifted from above him, not from him. Jessica had seen him and rushed forward, her composure finally cracked. "Marcus, wait!" He had stopped. She had stood there, suit wrinkled, eyes red, pride stripped bare. "You didn't tell me," she asked, voice breaking. "Why didn't you ever tell me who you were?" For a moment, the past hovered between them. Years of dinners, conversations, choices. Marcus looked at her, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with clarity. "You never asked who I was," he said quietly. "You only cared who you thought you were." Jessica swallowed hard. "I didn't mean—" He raised a hand gently. "It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what you did." He turned and walked away. Jessica stood frozen as he disappeared into the crowd. That night, Marcus returned to the small rental home. Emma ran to him, smiling wide. "Did we win?" Marcus knelt and hugged her tightly. "We're safe," he said. "That's what matters." As Emma laughed and pulled him toward the kitchen to show him a drawing she'd made, Marcus glanced back once at the door, at the quiet space where fear used to live. It was gone. But something else was coming, something final. And as he closed the door behind him, the world prepared to witness the last step of Jessica Madoff's undoing.
Not in court, not on headlines, but in the quiet place where power finally sat where it belonged.
The room waited for Marcus Chen to speak. It wasn't the tense waiting of fear or uncertainty. It was the kind that followed authority, quiet, respectful, deliberate. A long table stretched across the boardroom, polished to a mirror shine. Men and women in tailored suits sat on both sides, documents aligned, pens ready. The Medicorps logo glowed on the wall, smaller now beneath a new line of text noting its parent entity. At the head of the table sat Marcus, same straight posture, same calm presence. But everything else had changed. No hiding, no silence for protection. He presided today not as a temporary figurehead, but as the majority owner whose control had finally stepped out of the shadows. The board liaison from Chen Holdings sat to his right, more an advisor than a handler now. Beside him, in a chair slightly too big for her, sat Emma, now 8, her feet swinging gently as she drew in a small notebook. She hummed to herself, safe, unaware of the weight in the room. A senior executive leaned to another and whispered, barely audible, "They respect him." Marcus heard it anyway. He didn't smile, he didn't correct the tone. He simply replied, just as quietly, "They always respected the company. Now they know who protects it." The executive nodded, understanding settling in his eyes. The meeting moved forward. Reports were presented, decisions were made. The company that once carried Jessica Madoff's ego now carried something different: structure, oversight, boundaries. The financial controls tightened after the scandal. An independent audit committee answered directly to the board, not to a single ambitious director. Travel and expense policies were rewritten. Personal use of funds was explicitly banned, not informally overlooked. Marcus listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was precise, clear, final. No one interrupted him. No one needed to. He wasn't there to play CEO. The new, qualified CEO, someone who had built companies without stealing from them, handled day-to-day operations. Marcus handled direction, stability, instead of spectacle. At the end of the table, the board liaison slid a single document forward. "This is the last item." The paper wasn't dramatic, no bold warnings, no threatening language, just resolution. It formalized the final pieces. Jessica Madoff's permanent removal from all positions. Her shares converted and placed into a monitored structure under the court's orders. The company's commitment to cooperate fully with regulators. A governance charter that ensured no one person could quietly reroute funds again. Marcus looked at the document for a long moment. He remembered the night he had knelt beside a locked drawer, promising himself he would never need what was inside. He remembered Emma asking if they had done something wrong. He remembered Jessica's voice saying, "This is my apartment." He picked up the pen. No anger, no triumph, just clarity. He signed. The sound of the pen scratching paper echoed softly. When he finished, he set it down. "That concludes today's agenda," he said. The board stood. Some offered their hands, some simply nodded. Marcus didn't wait for applause. Outside, the afternoon sun rested gently on the building's glass facade. Marcus walked out with Emma, his hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Are we done?" Emma asked. "Yes, we are," she smiled. "Can we get ice cream?" Marcus laughed softly. "Yes, we can." They walked down the steps together, free, whole, unbroken. Behind them, the doors closed, not as an ending, but as a boundary he no longer needed to fight to cross. Across town, Jessica Madoff sat alone in a small apartment. No photos, no awards, no visitors. Her phone lay face down on the table. It hadn't buzzed all day. She stared at the wall, replaying moments that now felt unreal. Laughs that had vanished, confidence that had dissolved, a life she thought she owned. She finally understood something,
too late. Power had never shouted in her home. It had waited. Waited in drawers she never opened, in questions she never asked, in a man she never really saw. That evening, Marcus tucked Emma into bed in their new home, not the temporary rental, a simple, warm place he chose himself, purchased through a straightforward structure in his own name. This time, no secrecy, no hidden titles, just a house where every room felt like theirs. Emma looked up at him sleepily. "Dad?" "Yes?" "You're not sad anymore." Marcus paused, then smiled. "No, I'm not." He turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, listening to her breathing steady. He walked into the living room and looked around. No trophies, no luxury for show, just peace. Marcus sat down, closed his eyes, and let the quiet settle. Not as silence, but as strength. Because some people never need to prove who they are. They only need the right moment to stop hiding it. Power doesn't need to announce itself. It only waits for the moment it's needed.
I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If it moved you, like, share, and comment on the lessons you learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I'll see you in my next video.